嗱，呢一個嘅專題展覽名為革新的浪潮 Waves of Innovation Stories of the West Coast， 當中以18世紀末至19世紀中葉，直至而家發生喺加拿大西岸嘅歷史同埋故事，以捕魚同罐頭廠內各族群嘅唔同工種為例，探討發明、適應同改變嘅效果，點樣以唔同嘅方式影響各個社區內唔同嘅族群。
So with our feature exhibit this year, with Waves of Innovations, we wanted to look at the effects of how inventions and adaptations and changes affect different people in different ways in different communities. And we're using the examples of the diverse workforce and the diverse communities that we had in our fishing and canning industries, everywhere from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s to today.
展覽以圍繞西海岸商業捕魚創新故事同其對社區影響而展開，場地亦都以4種唔同嘅顏色劃分區域，幫助參觀者了解4大主題，分別係能量、漁業、保護同埋現代革新。當中原住民、加拿大籍華裔同埋日裔嘅聲音都有包括喺呢一個展覽裡面。佢哋為共同建設加拿大西岸嘅捕魚同罐頭工業都付出咗好多貢獻㗎。
So the Gulf of Georgia Cannery National Historic Site was designated a significant site because of the diverse workforce that helped build the industry, the fishing and the canning industry on Canada's west coast. And that includes everyone from the Indigenous peoples who lived in this area and harvested off of the waters and the land here for thousands of years before anybody else came. And then we had the European settlers coming in to build canneries and different industries up and down the west coast. And then we had people who came from China and Japan to help build the workforce, to provide the labor, to operate the machinery and to fish for the canneries and to make the industry grow and build. So we wanted to make sure that we included all those voices. Not many of our exhibits that we see these days have a multitude of voices, and we knew that that was a unique part of our history and wanted to make sure that we included all of those.
咁除咗提及各個族裔參與創新發展嘅同時其實佢哋亦都係曾經因為被種族歧視而面臨住極不平等嘅待遇嘅。今次嘅展覽亦都有揭露有關嘅內容添。
So one example of how innovations does not treat different communities equally is the example that we have in our exhibit, where we show how the fishing boats used to be just rowboats, so what we call wooden skiffs, where the fishers would row to cast their nets and to fish for salmon out on the Fraser and other rivers. In 1924, there was a ban on gas engines to be used on those fishing boats north of Rivers Inlet, so in northern BC. That was lifted, so fishers were able to use gas engines on their boat, which made their work faster and easier to do. However, there was still a ban on Japanese fishers to use those gas engines, and that wasn't lifted until 5 years later when it was fought in court, and only then were the Japanese fishers also allowed to use the gas engines on their fishing boats. So that's another example of how innovations may not have been treating different communities the same.
展覽亦都摘錄咗唔同群眾同埋業界人士對漁業革新改變生活嘅想法同埋故事，包括漁民、罐頭工人同埋佢哋嘅家人添，仲為參觀者提供一啲嘅互動裝置，大家可以親自坐入小船裡面體驗划船、觸摸唔同材質嘅漁網，比起只係用眼睛去睇牆上面嘅介紹就更加有趣啦。除此之外，展覽亦都係探討咗革新對大自然環境所造成嘅影響添㗎。
So when you think about it, there's different examples of innovations and inventions, how to make things easier again and last longer and cheaper. So we have the examples of synthetic fishing nets, which when they were introduced into the fishing industry, they were made of material that the fish couldn't really see in the water. They were lighter, they lasted longer. You didn't have to mend the nets after every season like you did when they were made out of linen or organic materials. But the effect of that was you find a lot of the floating fishing nets as garbage in the ocean, and they impact the habitats of the fish and the sea life in the waters. So that's again an innovation and invention that is impactful to our natural environment in a negative way.
展覽除咗用文字去敘述故事之外亦都係邀請到原住民藝術家 Christine McKenzie 以圖像描繪三文魚同地球上所有生物嘅聯繫。而作品 Salmon's Connection to Mother Earth 就被安排放喺展覽嘅盡頭，彷彿好似要為展覽所提及嘅人同故事做一個嘅總結啦。
In our exhibit, we do talk about innovations in energy and preservation and fishing methods, but we did want to talk about innovations today so that people can go home and think about the impact of innovations in their daily life. We do have a beautiful art piece created by First Nations artist Christine McKenzie, which kind of is at the end of our exhibit, but we don't call it a conclusion. It's the beginning of thinking about just the ripple effect of innovations and things that affect each other in nature. So she's created what she calls a creation piece, and it's called Salmon's Connection to Mother Earth. It's burnt wood on three big cedar planks, and when you look at it, you can see the rays of light emanating from one single salmon egg, and she believes that the salmon is the beginning of all life, which is true when you think about it. The salmon that inhabit the oceans, that feed the animals and the birds and the rivers, create the oxygen to feed on the plant life and provide nutrient to the soil. That's what she's depicting in her piece, and again, we think it fits really great with our exhibit because it does make you think about the future, what your actions, how they can affect the future, and in this case, how it affects the salmon's habitat. When you think about things as a consumer, think about how what innovations mean to you. There's an example of, you might be able to go to the self-checkout at a supermarket, but then what does that mean to the people who are working in the checkout stations? Like, are you taking their job away from them? So there's all these different questions you can ask about the choices that you make and how it affects other things. So the cause and effect of impacting the salmon's habitat, or maybe what kind of seafood you choose to eat, how they were caught. Is it sustainable? How does that affect the natural habitat around it, and then the wildlife around that habitat? Maybe think about those questions and how your actions can take an effect on other people or other environments or the community around you.
Waves of Innovation Stories of the West Coast 展覽由而家一直去到4月15號，有興趣嘅朋友可以去佢哋嘅網站查詢詳情。